telling you how to persuade people, but also how to resist persuasive messages. So you become inoculated or vaccinated against persuasive messages. So vaccinations, the same thing, the word is inoculations, okay? They work by exposing you to small doses of a virus, right? And so attitude inoculation actually works the same way. So what you do is you're exposing yourself to little doses of an opposing argument in order to practice defending your position a little at a time. And you get better at it, you get stronger at it, and more rooted in that particular attitude. So an example of this would be like going on to Facebook or Meta, apparently is what they call it now, but I'm going to call it Facebook. So going on Facebook and choosing to jump into a debate, right? So and it's very easy to do. All you need to do is go on any kind of any kind of public post of, like, for example, like a news channel, and just literally pick anything and jump on there, and you're going to see a debate going on. And usually I would even call it a straight out brawl, right? A fight. And you can sort of practice defending your position little bits at a time. And so if you expose yourself to counter arguments little bits at a time, what happens is that you start to build it almost like a muscle. You strengthen it like a muscle to be able to be stronger and better in your position. And you do that as you practice. It's very useful for law. Absolutely. Being able to practice defense, to practice being able to defend yourself and defend your position little bits at a time, and to inoculate yourself from that counter argument will make you a stronger debater and also root you stronger into that attitude. Now, another way that we can kind of be more resistant to persuasion is to be aware that you're constantly trying to be persuaded to buy something or do something or act a certain way. So the more aware you are, the better you are in being able to identify it and actually change it. Advertisers put products in their shows, in their movies. They get paid to even incorporate the brand names into their own scripts. But once you set out to notice those products, you're going to become a lot more aware of what advertisers are doing, and you're not going to fall into their trap of saying, oh, that character uses that iPad or device or MacBook, therefore I'm going to use that, right? So I'm going to show you guys some screenshots here in a second, and I want you to tell me what movie this is from, or TV show, what this is from, and then want you to tell me what they're advertising. Okay, so there's 4 here. I want you to tell me what is the movie or TV show, and what is the product that they are either actively sponsoring or is sponsored by them, or they're actively trying to show you to use. So I got one that says iCarly. That's the bottom right. Yep. And that is an Apple or iPad product. So this is an interesting one. Okay. This is an interesting one. So out of these 4, this is the only one that isn't a real product, right? They did this a lot. So I watched iCarly as it was running, and I'm older than you guys, and I recognized that it was like more of a kid's show, but it was a great show. I liked it. It was funny. So my husband and I would always watch it, even though we were like way outside the age range, but it's fun. Yeah. I mean, parents like it, they'll watch it. And I didn't have kids at the time, but I watched it as like, one of the shows I would be like, oh no, iCarly's on, let's get caught up. But it always had these pair products, right? And so obviously these pair products were a play on Apple products. And so why do you think they used the pear instead of the apple? What do you guys think? Dodging copyright. 100%. That's exactly what it was. Apple wasn't sponsoring them. They didn't approve their product being used there. They weren't sponsoring them. And so they were not allowed to use that logo, right? So what they did was pretty ingenious. And they said, we're going to do a play on this brand, right? And they could have done something like, instead of a window, they could have done a door, right? So they could have, put doors on their laptops and computers and phones and been like, this is a Windows, right? Play off of Windows. But they chose Pear to play off of Apple products. And so even without and somebody got it on chat. This is literally what I was about to say. They were still promoting Apple, even though they weren't, right? They didn't have the copyright access and the ability to say we are sponsored by Apple, but they were still promoting it, right? Which is ingenious because, as you know, it's expensive to to have sponsors. And then some sponsors aren't, going to agree because, iCarly was on Nickelodeon and maybe Apple doesn't, work with Nickelodeon because maybe they don't choose sides. I don't know. It is very similar. Somebody said it's so similar. It is advertising without advertising, right? So it's a really, really smart way to get around this kind of this huge barrier, right? So it's really interesting to see that you can see certain TV shows, movies, whatever, advertising products that are a play. And if you look at the main slideshow, I've got a couple of other examples of off products, right? Off brand stuff that is very clearly trying to mimic an actual brand. So and other things that we have here, Iron Man. That's a good question. You know what? I wrote in my notes that was Iron Man. But it could be Iron Man 2. So that's the scene where he's actually in the ring. He's boxing with what's his face, who becomes War Machine. That's Dick's Sporting Goods is what he's advertising there. He's drinking that liquid. So maybe it is Iron Man 2. It is when he sees Natasha for the first time. That's right, because he fights Happy in the ring. That's right. They don't fight. Natasha knocks Happy down. Y'all can't get me started on the Marvel stuff because I will just go off into my own little tangent here. Okay, so we have Modern Family. A lot of you picked up on that with the iPad. That's the top right. And the bottom left is obviously marketing Doritos with a Doritos suit. And that's the Colbert Report, Stephen Colbert. So all of these things are marketing, branding, and they, are really trying to demonstrate to you that you should purchase these products. And we see this too, not only in, yeah, it's been a while for me to see it as well. I'm getting comments of like, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. It's not just movies and TV shows. Now we have to think about how influencers like people who are on TikTok and Instagram are getting paid to promote particular products. And so if you guys are kind of following some of what's going on, there have been cases where people like, the Kardashians or the Jenners, they actually have like a script that they're given from the brand, and they actually just they use that script into their posts. And so what's really interesting is a couple of times there have been mistakes where the script was posted but it wasn't changed. It'll say like, insert your testimonial here, and you're actually seeing the original template of what they're supposed to be promoting. And so what's really, really interesting is that people are starting to be aware of this. So remember, if you're being more alert to product placement, either through movies, TV shows, right? If you're being more aware of what's happening here, then you're going to be less likely to fall into the trap, especially as we start to look at how influencers do the same thing. So they might have a face wash, for example, that they were paid to talk about, and they might say, I use this all the time and look at my beautiful skin. Well, you know what's usually the reason for their beautiful skin? Genetics is usually the reason for their beautiful skin. But they'll say, oh, I'm using this product and it's amazing and you should use it too. And they may not even use that product. But if you're aware that influencers do this, then you're not going to fall into the trap of, oh, that person has beautiful skin, I'm going to use that product because I want to look like that. Right? So being very aware that people get paid. This is how a lot of influencers make their money, is through branding. They're getting paid to advertise that product on their channel or on their page or on their profile, whatever it might be. Okay. So I already fell into the trap. Listen, I try all the time. I do fall into the trap. I'm like, ooh, that person, look at that. Look how good that looks on them. And there's been a lot of talk about that online, but yeah, I try to remind myself that they're getting paid to do that, but sometimes we do fall into the trap. Okay, so just to kind of bring it together today, what I'm hoping you guys would have gotten from this, and this, like I said, this is this was a different set of slides and different information, very similar to what's on the slides, but I'm going to kind of cover some of the things that we didn't cover on those slides next class. But what I'm hoping that you guys can at least take from what you learned today and what you learned on Tuesday is how to define attitudes, understanding the three components, the ABCs of how attitudes are formed, understanding that genetics and social context are all both very important in how we form attitudes, being able to use psychology concepts to know how to persuade people into changing their attitudes, right? And then also the last one is being able to block persuasion from changing your own attitudes, right? I'm going to show you guys kind of where the similarities are, just so that we're aware. So like, for example, if you look through the slides, we talked a lot about how advertisers try to change attitudes. One thing that's really fun is to think about how advertising can have such powerful effects. So like this particular example that I'm using is this person actually was paid $10,000 to get this casino name tattooed on her forehead. And so she said that she was going to use the money to pay for her son's college or private school, excuse me. And so let me ask you guys this. Would you take money to advertise something on your body or on your car? They have those like magnets and then stickers that you can put on your car. So if somebody said, oh, we would tint your windows for free, but you would have to, you'd have to advertise it. Okay, so I'm getting car, yes, face, no. Maybe on my car, but not my body. What if somebody offered you $1 million to get a tattoo on your face that said like, I don't know, Little Caesars Pizza? Some people have a price and some people are like, absolutely not. What if somebody give you $1 billion? Would you do it for $1 billion? Tattoo Little Caesars on your face. If somebody gave me $1 billion, I would probably tattoo whatever they wanted on my face. I would think about it on my arm. Okay, so, just kind of moving through, like I said, some of this we've been talking about, so I'm not going to go into super detail, but so like if we look at originally how advertisements for cigarettes, for example, were really aimed towards men, right? The Marlboro Man, right? So if you smoke, you're a big, strong man. Up until early 20th century, men bought like 99% of the cigarettes sold because it wasn't like culturally, it wasn't a thing for women to smoke, right? It was a man's thing. Then the ads started to target women because they thought, hey, we've got this whole gender that we're missing out here. By 1955, twice as many male as female smokers in the US. And then in 2004, 23% of adult men smoked, and then 19% of adult women. So just by targeting a new group of people, we can see that we're going to get people to do certain things. And so obviously that came from doing things like making smoking more feminine, having different kinds of cigarettes, having slims, adding the little the little attachment so people can smoke and look very, very feminine, so you don't get all the little pieces in their mouth. These are all things that the advertisers did to try to encourage different people to smoke. And so that's really important to think about, that advertisers, of course, do this on purpose, right? And so we talked about this already. We talked about, where attitudes come from. We talked about that there's, a nature and a nurture component. We've talked about genetics versus social experiences. So I just want to make sure that I'm moving through some of these slides to make sure that you guys know that what we went through isn't something that is it's supplement to what we have in these original slides. We talked about the affective, behavioral, and cognitive components, right? These are the ABCs. So that's something that you really want to know for this chapter. And then we talked about different Affectively based attitudes is a little bit more information on classical conditioning. I gave the example of having a grandmother, and the grandmother is wears a particular type of perfume, and you associate that grandmother with very happy feelings, and you associate that with that smell with your grandmother with those happy feelings. And so that would be how you would kind of formulate a emotionally based attitude based on classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is involuntary response. One thing that we did not talk about is operant conditioning. And this is a voluntary response to things like reward or punishment, right? And so if you make really good grades and you get money for making good grades, you're going to be more likely to make good grades again because you're getting reinforced for that. This comes from this idea of you have a particular behavior toward an object, and you're going to get either punished or reinforced for that thing. And that is going to either reinforce an attitude or it's going to change your attitude. So for example, if you have a child who is on the playground, and let's say the child is white, and there's another child of color, a person of color, or somebody who's not white, and then the parent says, oh, we don't play with that child, or the child gets yelled at for playing with the kid, then that's punishment for playing with a child who looks different from them. And so what that does is it roots this attitude into this emotionally affectively based component, and it's going to help form the attitude that we don't play with these people because they're different from us. And so that is using punishment. You could also see the opposite of that. So maybe a child is hesitant to play with another child that looks different from them. Maybe the child has a disability. And then the parent going, no, 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 it's fine. That's great that you're playing and you're sharing with this other child. And that attitude about inclusiveness is then reinforced because the child is getting praised. So these kinds of things can really impact how we, root our particular attitudes. We talked about behaviorally based attitudes. I gave you an example of that, and this is really similar to that example. We talked about cognitively based attitudes, and the example I used about buying a car. So again, just reiterating that these slides these are supplement to what we kind of went over. This is really not different information. It's just, there might be a little bit more detail on some of these slides. We talked about explicit versus implicit attitudes. We talked about the implicit attitudes tests, and we talked about bias. We talked about all that already. And then finally, I just want to kind of reiterate that we talked about attitude change. We talked about how present ratings, for example, can be very different based on a particular point in time, depending on what happens.